The big thing for the big thing for it is that you have names, year, title, journal, volume and issue. You can find them in page numbers.
Yeah, it has all of that. It just has below it.
Yeah, after that, I wouldn't worry about it at all. Huh. Oh, can you hear me? Hope you can hear me. Let's see. So yeah, when it comes to the citations, like VOI or data access, I really don't care about. Mainly because as you develop it, it ends up being something you actually want to run with whenever you go to send it out for publication, that whole process. It varies by journals. And all of them will say, like, we use APA or Chicago or things like that. It's like, do you really? Yeah, but there's some different nuances to it. It's like, it'd be like just the naming convention for the references list. Is it last name, first name, or is it just initials? How do they want those initials set up? Because sometimes they'll specify the year. They want brackets around it or not. That can change by journal. The rest of it just is kind of the same. It's like the title of the article will be non-italicized, title of the journal is italicized, and then basically where it is within that journal. That last part will basically stay the same throughout. That first part will change quite a bit depending on the journal. And sometimes the citations themselves will change a little bit within the text. So you have to be ready for that kind of stuff. So I usually don't really care. It's just more like, I need to be able to tell where you're getting it, follow APA as closely as you can. Some things are less APA and maybe more Chicago kind of things. Like when we start quoting Supreme Court cases, a common where it's like, that one historically was within Chicago. You wouldn't have even found a process to do so within APA like 20 years ago. I have not dug back into APA manuals to see if they started updating it. I really never cared enough. I cared about, okay, do you understand how the content works? Are you citing it properly? Are you going to the right places? Are you integrating it all together? Because it is something that it spirals out so fast that you have to have a good bearing on where you're trying to go to make sure that you get there. It's kind of the same way I talk to you all, probably all of my classes at the beginning of every semester about, okay, career paths. It's like you don't have to have a very specific one, have a generalized idea of where you want to go and what you want to be doing. You use that as your guiding light for everything else that you do, because as you do that, you keep your eyes on that target, and before you know it, you're there. It's just like riding a bike. Whatever you're looking at is where you're going to end up going, whether that's good or ill. My favorite story about that's probably got to do with teaching my son how to ride a bike. You have to let go of them at some point, let them off. And wherever they go, it's going to be that training type of thing. You got that training in, or you're still working on it. He had hit that point where it was like, okay, I can let go of him. He can go a little bit away. It's probably about 20, 30 feet or so. Fast enough, I can't keep up with him. Okay, he's off. He looks at the neighbor's mailbox. I'm like, don't look at it. Don't look at it. It's like, I'm headed right for it. It's like, yeah, don't look at it. I'm headed right for it. Don't look at it. Stop, help. Dude, you're like 50 feet away from me. I can't do anything for it. Of course, he's like 6. He's not thinking. Snaps it right off at the ground. I mean, they both just wipe completely out. When you got, why'd you push me in? Didn't push you in the back. Keep that guiding light in mind. And that's not to say that anything in here is like that, in that it will, you can go off track. It's like, yeah, you can find segues that will take you off track and be back. The main thing is you'll want to work with, whether it's me or anyone else on a project, if you want to develop it. And even since you're in capstone now, it's like after you're done, you still want to go through development. That door is open, and it's not shut. And that's really the big thing is our role is guide to some degree. Also, by the time you leave out of here, I want you to be as close to that middle ground between bachelor's and PhD as possible, because that means more and more skills. That means more power, I guess, for you all in your jobs, because just with that spreadsheet stuff, as we're building the papers, I'll start showing you how that works. You'll see how quickly take a number of different skills. And it's like, okay, these will start fitting into this type of project. But not only that, you can start seeing, yeah, you've already used a number of these skills. You just don't realize if you do a couple small changes, you can do a whole lot more with it. And that's the main thing with this is just getting people's feet wet kind of thing, get your hands in it and see what it's like. Because when you start actually handling it, it's different than reading it in a book. It's more real. And to some degree, I like coming in your class and talking about the concepts, but like, how much does that get across in terms of practical applicable skills is not always easy. And so it's like, that's why we get the, here, play with this, take a look at this. Here's something else that's not been mentioned, that kind of thing. Because basically it's this time period should be what exactly from the point of go all the way to the point you finish. That should be looked at as time and opportunity to gather as many skills as you can, not just content, not just information or knowledge, but the integration of it and basically start identifying how the skill sets that you can acquire will start benefiting you quite directly. And that's not something I learned in any of my classes. That's something I learned working on the college campus for times that I did. And it was always interesting to me to see how what worked and what didn't. Right? There are some lessons that like people don't typically have in class that should be had in class. And if you keep it on the research project side, the people who don't have time for it will never get any exposure to it, so they have no idea what they're missing. And then that's one of the reasons why you end up with that gap where it's you'll see it in books or things like that. They'll mention, okay, the practitioner academic gap, causes all these issues with communication and why plans that we have research projects don't take off. Part of it's that right there is that in this process where we have common ground, some important lessons didn't make it through. And so identifying that's been the big one. We're into class time a little bit, so let's get started. I won't keep you here too long today because I've got stuff for you to do. I need to talk a little bit about last class. I said I was going to post some stuff out last time. I didn't do it. I got tied up. I broke free at some point. I'm just kidding. I did post that stuff out there. I'm not going to require you guys to do anything with it because I'm already doing stuff with it. And I want you guys just to kind of see it. So let me share my screen so you can see this. And we'll talk a little bit about the project. Then we'll hop into chapter 5 is I think where we're at. We'll go into a little ways because I want to see where you guys are at in terms of reading. And then I'll kind of turn you loose onto the papers as they're shaping up, which you'll probably think of what papers kind of thing. We haven't had any writing assignments. We'll talk about that. All right. So first step. In classwork, if you played with this, most of you have, if not, just take a look at it because you'll see it's like, okay, these are some of the formats that you'll get data in different places, whether it's reports. Getting that back into where it's a data format that you can use it was kind of what that purpose was, because you can go out there, you can find these numbers, you can find all kinds of things, but getting into where you can run is a hard thing. The next one is sort of how you build off of that stuff. So in classwork 2, I literally say, late getting this to you. Take a look at the attachment. I'm supposed to say your, I missed an R. Let your minds play with this. What you need to do is look at these. So these are ACS, sorry, American Communities Survey. They're associated with the census. You need to be familiar with both of those things because if you want to, I guess, bake a cake, get to know a couple cooks kind of thing, a couple bakers and go in the kitchen. This is one of the ways we get our demographic variables, which are control variables for everything. You get them at different levels, different ways that they're computed, and they do different kinds of things depending on how you use them, which is why I put this in here like that. The census, you guys are probably already familiar with the census. Basically what that is every 10 years, we kind of do some numbers, get an idea of what the population is doing. It's for government, but we use it because those are, they'll give us the numbers for where people are, what demographics are in what areas and that kind of stuff. But it will also identify change over time because all you can do is look at differences between any of those years. The way it's typically handled within the research, when you start digging into actually completed research article stuff. You start looking at that, what you'll see is that there's a few different ways that they handle things. Probably the most common and the easiest way is you stick with the census data. You identify whatever year you want to focus on, if you want to focus on any time aspect at all. And even if you don't, you still need to identify, okay, we'll do this next year or this year or that kind of thing. If you're actually collecting the data, it's data that's already collected, just be specifying which year you want to focus in on. American Community Survey, they post out stuff for every single year. There's a lot more math involved in the census. The census, they'll go out and they'll contact more people. They'll still use math, but their direct involvement with people is much higher. So if you want to look at a one-shot research type of thing where you're looking at the nature of, we'll talk about topics here in a second, your juvenile stuff. The one I'd suggest you use, dig into the YLSI. You should write that down. Because that's going to be one of those risk assessments. And that's one that very easy to get a hold of. You can get a hold of that for counties across this state. You can start looking at all kinds of different things related to that. Just in terms of whether you're looking at concentrations, whether you're looking at factors associated with higher rates in different counties across this state. There's all kinds of things you do just from that one perspective. If you're looking at a single year, you can take that census data and that can be your controls. That'll have your data for, racial demographics, education, proportion of males to females, youths, all that kind of stuff. You build those in as your controls. You figure out what your primary explanatory variable or variables are, the things that you're really thinking will actively change whatever your dependent variable is. And then you analyze it to see if that's it. It's literally like seeing what's out there. What can you grab and what can you put together? When I say cooking, it is almost like cooking, right? You have your basic elements there. You need a set number of variables, a specific topic, and a theory. And so it's one of those things that all those are self-referencing. You identify the topic you're interested in, you just hop over, and that's kind of what I set here for the term paper. I've got an attachment here I want all of you to read if you've not read it before, because it'll frame it for you. We'll go over that a little bit. But you have topics. We'll talk about those here in a second and kind of develop those a little bit. First thing's creating an outline, right? To do that, you're going to look up your topic, and I'd just probably pop in prevention or whatever it is, crime prevention, and see what pops up, right? You'll check, I put out here, I think I mentioned under writing assignment 1, go to the library's website and start looking at their A to Z databases. I think I worded that backwards because that was based on another institution. You want to look at Academic Search, Sage, and JSTOR. Those are all good sources for us. There are other ones there. It's just how much overlap and actually tap into those journals is going to be lesser. As you do that, you'll see what kinds of research pops up. As you're looking at the research that pops up, you'll see what kinds of theories they use and how. That's going to be one of those things that as you're going through that research, you're going to see some theories are more prominent than others. That's a good way to identify an easy theory to address in this thing. Or as you're in capstone, you're going to be doing the same thing. Like right now, I'm trying to remember where you're at in that. So you would have picked topics. You're not quite in the theories yet in there, are you? It's been a couple of days since I've looked at it.
I'm doing not the introduction, but
Okay. So that's the lit review.
Mhm.
Yeah. So this is where we're focused on lit review here too, but I'm also going to sew in the next section. That's theory. So by the time you get done with the paper in this class, if you're going to go capstone, you'll have the theory section and the lit review of your capstone done. The timing thing kind of sucks because they've been easier for you in some regards, but at least this way it's no addition, right? You'll have those items to go capstone. If you go thesis route, you want to do that. Basically, all it is okay, let's go pop it into a program. I'll show you what buttons to click, and we'll sit down and explain what the rest of the numbers that pop up, what they mean. And And it literally is that. You just have to do it twice. Once I'll tell you what the numbers are. The next one I'll tell you, okay, this one increased. It had this level of effect, and that means that this factor, basically has an effect on whatever it is we're dealing with. And that means that our proposition that this theory has for it was supported. And that's basically it. It is something it takes a long time to do in terms of eyes and attention. It does, because you have to do that same process a couple different times. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So the first step is creating an outline sorted by topics. I do that because that's that same thing I was telling you about. Hey, you can pop this into a spreadsheet and sort it if you want to. You can build that, you don't have to for this. What I'm looking for this, I wish I could have found a good example before class. I'll keep looking to see if I can find one, because I know I've got at least a few across a couple different classes. The basic thing I'm looking for is within that paper, you're gonna have a section for your intro, you're gonna have a section for theory, you're gonna have a section for the actual research that's existing already. We're gonna call extant research, extant research existing. The introduction I'll have you write last. People always start with that, and yeah, but sometimes it's better to start with the body, because then you know what you're going to say. So if you're going to tell them what you're going to say, it's easier for you to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Right? Introduction, body, conclusion. As you're doing that, you skip the introduction, you go to theory. Your theory is going to focus on your concepts and the proposition, the theory, just like in theory class. Here are the elements that they say are factors. Here's how it works. And that'll build out that theory section. You'll probably only spend a couple pages in that, because you'll have the primary things, the primary documents for the theories. I'll send the originals to you, and I'll let you build out a little bit from there. But basically what it'll be is, here is the thing that started that theory. Give me 2 pages about it. So you'll have, I've got 30 to 40 to 60 to 100 pages worth of reading to do. I can dial that down into 5 pages real easy, right? That's just gonna be looking, okay, this paragraph talks about X. I'll write that down. Write that down. Okay, now that I'm done with that, and that took me all of like 4 hours because I'm not really reading paragraphs, I go back and read through my notes and see if it makes sense, right? Speed you up a little bit. As you do that, and you're doing that across multiple research articles, you'll see more and more common themes coming up. As you do that, that identifies those variables. It identifies basically everything that you need. You'll go through, once you've done that, and then, okay, these are the big topics that seem to be related to, whether it's juvenile offending or whatever the topic is. I can't think of any others right now. Okay. Introduction, skip. Theory, we've got outlined. Basically, you're gonna be dealing with just a handful of theory articles, maybe just one, depending on how much we really want to get into it. From there, it'll be, okay, these are the common concepts, the common variables they keep talking about within these research articles, okay? Okay, those are our choices for what kinds of variables we want to build into it, maybe, depending on how it's set up. That outline is how we'll sit down and go through it. We'll need to sit down and go through it, right? And that's one of those things that as we're doing that, you'll get an idea for that triangulation process, right? You do it all over the place. I kind of mention that here, because there's a few different ways you do it. You start with your topics, you pull the articles you first get, the ones that are closest to what you want, you go to their references, right? If you got more than 2 articles, their references lists, pull the 2 of them and look at them both together, you will see there's gonna be common sources there. Anything that's common between them, you probably wanna try to grab those, right? Because that'll add more words, more citation, more names after what you say. The role of a citation within all of this discipline, all of academia, is one that can't be understated. It literally can't be. The best way for me to get that kind of point across is for me to give you an analogy is if you were exorcising demons, you know, it matters what name you call on, right? Whether you're calling Ghostbusters or some deity, it doesn't really matter. But the fact is you're calling on someone else's work to come and support what you're trying to say. That's the same kind of thing, right? As you do that, I want you to try to aim for at least 35 peer-reviewed research articles in the next week. That's a quick timeline. I know that's kind of unreasonable. Don't stress out about the number. Just as kind of a guide. If you end up only with like 15, don't worry about it, right? The main thing is that you focus on the peer-reviewed side. The peer review process. You guys ever had anybody talk to you about that? No. Okay. That's when we need to talk about that. And the reason why I bring this up is I did encounter someone who didn't really have an understanding of it. They were further along than what I thought they should have been for that. The peer review process is one that is vital for what we do. This is kind of a methods lesson, not really. It's more of just for everything that you touch in this area, this is going to be vital. Where you get information is as important as the information itself. That's the role of the whole references list, is so I can find it myself if I want to, or any of your readers. That's the point. The peer review process is sort of a proofing kind of thing. Are you following the proper processes? How biased is this? Is this something where there's some shenanigans going on and maybe what you're doing here is some math that's funky just to get the numbers that you want? Or maybe it's something else, right? Maybe it's a political thing where people are using that to advance themselves for no real reason other than they're avoiding real work associated with it. Because you'll run into all of those for whatever field you're in. What this does is, if you go for the submission part, you'll send it off to a journal. They'll have an editor, right? That editor will have a whole list of people who have published in that journal before. People who have similar topic interests or research that they've done in those kinds of areas. That's who gets to read your stuff first and make the decision if you make the cut. You get at least 2 of those people looking at it at least twice, most of the time. Usually what happens is if you send it in, if it's horrible, they'll say, don't send it back. It doesn't have to be horrible. It's just like, you can irritate somebody, right? You can send it in, you'll get a revise and resubmit. That's the most common thing, right? Just like you send in a paper, it's just the whole point of this, why there's a draft, and then we'll go back through the whole thing again, right? Because I want you to do it, I want you to see the feedback, and I want you to make those changes kind of thing. They won't give us nearly the same kind of feedback as what I'll give you. It'll be a few words, and I've got to figure that out from there kind of thing, whether it's me, whether it's you, whether it's whoever's doing it. If you do all the proper steps, you'll make it in. If you don't, if it's something that you ignore what they say, guess what? It's a hard no. You're done with that journal. Go find somewhere else. Ideally, what it does is it keeps crap out. There's some question as to whether or not it does, but the problem is it keeps the crap out, but not entirely. What that means is for any other source of information you have that doesn't have a process like that, it's going to have a whole lot more crap, and it's going to be a whole lot worse, and you don't even have any idea for how bad it can get in terms of biases. I mean, I can point out areas within research and theories where I can show you it's like, these might be biases that are creeping in. That's going to be completely different than I can go over here to show you this person compiled this information, but because their bias is such as the way that they is, every step of everything that they've done in this process has invalidated the results because of how they handle it, how they're looking at it, right? Don't worry about that for you guys, because that's what I do, right? I'll be watching as you go. At this stage is where people usually feel uncomfortable, because it's like, I'm just going to give you what's in your head and say, go see what you can find and gather, right? If you feel lost, or if you see something you don't know if it's off topic, or if you're getting out in the field, that's one of those things that'll be a conversation we need to have. That can be in here, that can be outside of class, it can be by email, doesn't matter. I am hard to catch, so you will have to sometimes search for me and find me, because sometimes I don't even know where I'm at. Yes. That's delving into the unknown. I put it in there like that because that is exactly what it felt like to me. I felt lost. It was the first semester of my master's program. I spent every single day of the week not going to bed before 3 and not getting up after 7. Right? And that's an entire, more of a semester, almost a year. Like, I don't want anybody to go through that kind of stuff, but that's not the degree I want to see you thrown, but that is the intent and spirit. That kind of thing. This one, I'll see if I can find a good template to send out to you so you have an idea. It's relatively straightforward. It will be this. Okay. In this section, topic, list of sources. And it doesn't even have to be like a full reference source. It can be, actually, you probably should go full reference, just go bullet style, because we haven't been sharing articles yet, but we will be just as soon as we get topics narrowed down. What we'll do from there, that first thing is theory, 3 to 5 pages, March 12th. Any topic at all, I can identify a theory. There are some that work for everything in this area, and there are some that can be more specific to your topics. What will happen is whenever we talk about topics, we'll talk about that. You'll spend about 5 to 10 pages reviewing extant existing research. So you end up with about 15 pages, not including your introduction, because that's going to be short, or your front matter or your back matter. Like, you got a cover page. That doesn't, it's like that kind of thing. You got reference pages. Yeah, those things don't count. People try to. It's like, I don't care about that. I don't look at them unless I'm curious to see how well you did at formatting. That kind of thing. You get in the outline, the theory, and the review for that date. Guess what? That's your term paper draft. That part's done. You don't even have to worry about that. That part's checked, right? Takes the pressure off of you. Make sure you're working towards it. It's like, it's not about getting to the finish line. It's about that slow crawl, because this is the point where you're starting to get work where this isn't something you can finish in a day. It's not something you can finish in a week. Maybe it'll be something you can finish in 6 months to a year, right? That's a whole different way to get to manage time, right? Most of us have things that once I get that out of the way, I can breathe easy. I'm done for the day. This one's never like that. This is one that you get out of it what you put into it. How much do you want to grow? It depends on how much you want to build. And that's exactly what this is. And that's the whole point of this program is, as you go, can you build? And I'll show you how, and we can do that. From there, probably about 2 weeks after I get each of these things, the outline I won't really review like I will written work. What I'll do is I'll sit down and, okay, these are good sources. These are, we'll still use them, or maybe it's like, okay, these ones, I kick those out. That kind of thing. I don't expect much in the way of like revisions of like variables and that kind of stuff, because most of those are pretty straightforward. Maybe in theory, you'll probably not have any trouble with that. Most of it will be trying to make sense of the conflicting information you'll find. That's going to be the big thing, because that's the synthesis of research. Is basically we've conducted a whole bunch of analyses at different places, different times, similar topics, and some overlapping areas. And we've got to bring all that together to come up to identify what those rules are for our topics, right? Like youth. We have this way that we assess people to identify the risk associated with them once they're involved with the criminal juvenile justice system, right? Now that we have that, we can look at that, and we can look at any number of facets that we can look at. Okay, just descriptives. Like, okay, what's the relationship between the number of kids, the severity of those YLSIs, and some of those demographic things? Like, are we seeing some disproportionate racial stuff? Are we seeing some youth stuff? Are we seeing something other issue creeping in that's driving this? Or does this seem like something that's just way atypical? Like, what's going on? You know, and that's part of it. You look at it, now you got something you got to try to look at and make sense of. And so that's the general idea for how that will work. Need to drink more. Throat issues. I do not like that. This article will tell you how to write a literature. Basically, what this will do explains what it is, right? From there, it'll identify its importance. What does it do? The things that you should be looking for. What focus should it take? Right now, the only focus I want you to have is just very general towards your topics. So that one's pretty open. Okay. I don't want to say anything about that. Open is good if you get really specific. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Sometimes too general can be bad. If you find that you're not finding enough or you're finding way too much, let me know and we'll see. I'll also show you how to narrow those things down. That'll be an email and I'll probably get back to you in like a day or so, kind of thing, if you find that's the case. Quantitative versus qualitative. That'll matter less for in here. Focus on quantitative because quantitative is easier, quantitative is faster. Qualitative is more interesting. Qualitative takes even more time. Okay. Difference between literature review. I really wouldn't even worry about the differences between. The basic point is that you are doing it. Here's where it starts talking about outlining the literature review. Right? That'll be the one that helps you as you start working on the outline. Remember, the outline you give me is very skeletonized. So you've got room to play with it. Okay? It can literally just say, okay, my topic is juveniles. Theory. Yes, we'll play with that one. From there, existing research. Well, this focus, that theory, how it works, it will identify a number of those variables. So it'll build out from there really quickly. From there, once the words are on the paper, basically the editorial process is probably where we've had the most growth because whenever I was in your shoes versus now, at first the hardest thing was getting words on the paper. It's not that anymore. Now it's getting the right words there. And as we work on that, you'll see that to some degree and you'll pick up on tone, language, that kind of stuff. That's one that will happen naturally. From there, any questions about any of that stuff? I spent longer on that. Okay. No feeling overwhelmed or anything like that? Okay. Don't. The biggest thing is to spend some time digging into the literature on that one. So for you, focus on the YLSI. Figure out what it is, its history, where it comes from, that kind of stuff. Because that is one that's very easy to deal with and you can start moving on that one pretty quickly. Your topic again, what was it?
Immigration.
Immigration. Okay, so there's a whole lot going on with that. Give me a second to think about that. Immigration. Okay.
I feel like it's a broad topic, but it's difficult trying to, choose a specific thing that'll have a lot of articles and stuff.
Yeah. What I would do is literally just start with immigration and crime prevention and see what pops up. Because that's one I've not dug into. That's one that there's a lot of different directions that could go. The hardest thing with that one is our population there. We wouldn't really have any hard numbers on it, kind of thing. And so that might be one. If we want to deal with that, we'd start maybe here locally, kind of thing. We wouldn't necessarily start at the county level or bigger. We'd be like, okay, pilot this thing here local and see what happens, see if we can spin it out. That kind of thing. Let's see, who else? I know Julia's online and Tristan. I remember I was looking at your guys' class, work across different classes, because I've got capstone theory and this class. Trying to remember. I was looking at those, trying to figure out what interests people had. In theory, the first writing assignment I had in there, I'm getting ready to get feedback on that. That'll probably be tomorrow. A lot of people chose social disorganization for that first assignment. And that was the pick a theory that's interesting to you. If that's a theory that's interesting to you, that's one that would fit really well with that. If it's not, because it may be just one because I had only opened part of the course to that point in time, so they hadn't had access to all the original documents, to all of those theories I have in class. I don't know if people went the convenient route and just used what they had available rather than emailing me and asking for more stuff to read. So that's going to be a different conversation in that class. So if that one is one that you're interested in, readily available, fairly easy to start doing. But if it's one that you know, it's just been something that's mentioned, you're not quite sure, it's like we can dig into that too. Start with the research side of that one.
I got two for mine, was social learning
Mhm.
and then social bond. Kept popping up.
Okay,
in a
so that would
lot.
be, is that bonding? Is that Hershey, Sykes and Matza? I can't remember which.
Yeah,
Those two pop up in my
Hershey and Bandura.
Bandura, yeah, Hershey. Okay, social bond. So what I would dig into in that one is start with YLSI.
Mhm.
See what topics it addresses in terms of it's trying to give a risk assessment to use, see what different domains it taps into, because that will have an impact on that, right? Because it can go a couple of different ways. You can focus on that, or focusing on the wild side first, because that's the one that will specifically start identifying, okay, is this one that's going to be focused on more the social control side of things, or is this something else? The learning, the social control, like, we'll talk a little bit about theories for a second, because this book does it a couple times. I want you to pay attention to how they treat theories in this book, because it's going to be different than theory books. Theories, they'll give you a chapter on a type of theories, right? There's all these theories that fall into this realm. Yes. What's really nice about, I think it was chapter 5, there's a section where we're talking about social control and social disorganization. What they did is they took a different perspective on it. Like, okay, you're doing so many overlapping variables, you could actually put these things on a spectrum. On one side, you're doing social disorganization and how it causes crime. On the other end, you're doing social control and how that helps people not commit crime, right? And so those are two opposing forces that kind of work together to address the same thing, right? Just moving in different directions. One's positive, one's negative. One causes crime, one prevents it, but it's all in the same thing. A lot of theories are like that. You just have to figure out what elements work best for others. I don't expect you guys to know that. I expect you to tell me what theories kind of seem interesting to you. Let's start playing with those ideas. That's the big one. Playing with ideas is that's what scholarship is. You want to know what scholar is can you play with an idea that's not yours? Can you let it not affect you? Can you continue with that project and move it forward? Kind of things like that. That's what it is. Can I generate new knowledge or find out something I don't know? Well, you guys, you already are doing it. You do that daily. It's just now we'll move up the scale. And that's that. What else do I need to tell you before we get back into this? Any questions? Okay. Seems like a lot of work. It really isn't. It really isn't. What you'll find is you'll end up spending probably more hours staring at a computer screen in the next week than you'd like. You'll kind of like it because there's masochism involved. And by the time you're done with that, it may take you a couple days kind of really just to settle on it and kind of bring all of it together. Makes sense, because just like with that theory thing, you have to start pulling out that underlying meaning, right? You know, we were talking social disorganization, social control. It's like it doesn't really matter so long as we're moving in the right direction, getting ready for crime. Theory matters. But for this class, it's more of a secondary thing. I just want you to hit in there so it'll help you in capstone or if you do a thesis. That's why that's there. You'll have familiarity with theory, you'll know how it works to a small degree, some exposure. And you got a bigger idea for, we're gonna address this problem up front and the different ways we can do it for the subject that you're interested in. And I think that's a good plan forward, and the timeframes there are pretty, they seem closer than they're closer than what I had the original schedule, just because of snow days and I was a little slow with getting this out. But if you have any trouble with meeting any of those timelines, let me know. Those are very easily adjusted. That whole second half after that term paper draft, those are all just revision things. So there's no more no new work generated at that time. It's revising, we're just refining, much easier. So it's like we got time to play with. Just make sure you're using it in your free time. You're putting some of it towards this. Not a whole lot, but enough to where you can get through at least 30 articles in the next week and tell me, it's like, okay, here are the different topics I have, and here are those 30 articles I looked at and the different ways they fit across these topics. It's messy. That's social sciences. But we don't have to do like the math involved in quantum physics or something. Yeah, small benefits, I guess. You pick your problem when you pick your profession. I like this one. This one's got cool problems. All right, so that will get you there. So got a good idea for you. Got a good idea for you. Tristan, what was your topic? If you have sound. If you don't have sound, you can type it in. I know Julia's. She's going to start that earlier, so she can capitalize off of that. If you don't know, that's fine. Or if you don't have audio, that's fine too. But if you'd like to start troubleshooting that, I'll start walking through that and I'll give you some good ideas. That first week supplemental or chapter 1 supplementals, however they're titled in there, those will have some of those primary source documents for you already. That's why I popped those out there. Socialist Organization is one of them. But there's a, okay, cool. Yeah, don't worry about that. You're square. Yeah, what's my train of thought there? What was I talking about? I haven't slept much. Got caffeine today though. Yeah, it will seem like a lot, but it really isn't. The hardest thing will be, I don't really think that any of this is that hard. The hardest part will probably be that first initial step of, am I finding the right kinds of things? And it's like, I don't care about it. I just want you to find things right now. You bring me things and I'll start showing you the difference. Good ideas versus bad ideas. I'll teach you both. Afterwards, I'll show you which ones are good, which ones are bad. It's like, that's probably one of the biggest things for education. It's like, you don't not teach something that's bad. No, you teach something that's bad and then you show them why it's bad. That kind of thing. From that, yeah, play with this a little bit. And that's just literally just take a look at the types of variables in there and it'll download it. You literally just click into it and see it. And so, yeah, don't care about this. Data. So if this is, okay, counties across all counties here. Okay. Total age. Indicators, median age, sex ratio, age dependency ratio. All those things, right? You compile that just like what we did that first spreadsheet for all those counties, add those in as new variables. Guess what you have? Whatever variables you want to play, and then you can show you some of the math for calculating different things associated with it. And we'll talk about that right now. Okay? So it's something that if you feel nervous, don't worry about it. It really isn't. This is the same as you guys ever play Minecraft? You know what Minecraft is though. Okay. I played it like 3 times. Coolest thing about it is I can build and I don't have to worry about my resources. I spent too many resources. I don't have enough wood to build the next thing, right? Since these are all ideas, there is no destruction. There is only creation. You break something apart, you can put it back somewhere completely new and it might still function. This is play. This is play like no other kind of play. There are no rules here in terms of that. You can have as much fun as you want. We'll get off into the topic. We were talking about Chapter 4, I skipped that one, didn't I? Is that the one that was on British stuff? Chapter 5 starts with community crime prevention stuff, and I'm gonna give you a very fast version, because this one's a pretty short chapter, and I've already spent 40 minutes talking about that. I don't want to keep you here. I kept you here longer on last class than I probably should have. But I'm trying to get a read on the room. I have a hard time making you guys. Is it safer to stay or safer to go? Which is best? Okay. Okay, so chapter 5, community crime prevention. He starts talking about, Aaron Malik and Nigel Fielding, the United Kingdom. So a lot of this has that focus in the UK. Again, we've already talked about that. I'm not going to focus about that, but they do talk about a little bit about history, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing to bring up at this point. So if we were dealing with the history of crime prevention, it starts with medieval times. Oh, no. Here's so I can see it. There you are. Bing. All right. Hello. So far we've been talking about some optional classwork if you want to do it, and the term paper. I broke it out into basically steps within Blackboard that have outline timelines and that kind of stuff. Since you missed that, this is being recorded, so I'll pop it up into the class. It'll probably be tomorrow before I can get that up though. All right, so all that's there. Next step, where's my mouse line? Right, okay, anything for that. I do want this in both places though. Put it here. No. And we'll pop it up back there anymore. It used to pop it up in both. Oh well, I guess I'll just leave it back here. Okay, cool. So history. We're talking about medieval. Responsibility. Question. Who would be responsible for crime prevention efforts in medieval times? Feeling this. There we go. So if we were dealing with history. Okay, let's do it this way. Have you guys ever heard of this? The social contract. Okay, we'll start there. Social contract is kind of a philosophical argument behind the basis of society itself. Basic premise is that despite the fact we don't make verbal or literal agreements, that we will follow the rules and that kind of thing, that in general, since we all do agree to the rules of society, we can form together. What that means functionally is that for freedom and society to coexist, you have to give up some measure of your freedom to be around people, right? If you think about all the behaviors that you have the ability to conduct versus the ones that you choose to, there's some differences there. Any prime examples of something that would be something you could do, but would never choose to do? I want you guys think about that one for a second. Can you come up with anything? No? Okay.
Can you repeat that?
An action that you could commit, but would never actually do. I'll even add a caveat. Under normal.
Murder?
Yeah, that's a good one. Murder, right? Most people will choose not to do that. Some people still do. If you look at its acceptability, though, in societies across time, you'll see we have no problem with it at all. In fact, if you look across all criminal actions, you cannot find one that has always been held as illegal or has been quite acceptable in some society, right? Whether you're talking rape, whether you're talking slavery, whether you're talking whatever, it's like, that's people, right? We have to agree to the rules to bind together, and if we don't do that, guess what? You piss off enough people, you get an uprising, and guess what? That whole social thing goes away, right? We have to bind together for some measure of protection. We have to, right? 'Cause that's the only way you can fight off the barbarians or the raiders or attackers, that kind of thing. To do that, you give up some of that freedom. To what degree is the question? That's kind of the premise behind the social contract, is that ideally we give up utilitarian basis. We give up the lowest amount of freedom to allow for this to exist. The point at which it becomes so restrictive, we cannot move, we break those chains, and that society falls. It's that. This has heavy elements throughout this entire chapter. First thing you look at right here, history in medieval times, society is completely different. Responsibility is probably the biggest word of the game. Who's responsible for what here? You're not far off from just being out in the woods on your own, guys. And this was like that for what, till like 100 years ago? Not even, right? This was all on individual, right? Families. This will talk a little about like hue and cry, that kind of stuff. You remember that from whether it was intro to CJ to policing to any number of things. Underlying premise there is that, right? You have the responsibility, you have to take the actions. You also might have to lose some of your freedoms to bind together society, right? So you just started more restrictive. A few different things I want to talk about there. What else do I want to talk about there? Responsibility. As life has shifted, so has the responsibility for this whole task, whether it's dealing with crime itself or crime prevention. You're going to be dealing with both in these times. That's something that's changed significantly over time. I don't want to go into a lecture about, the Industrial Revolution or the change in city structures or our move away from kingdoms and fiefdoms and things like that, because there's no need for that. That changed though. That changed a lot. There were what's the worst kind of criminal? Personal, like
A serial killer?
Sure. Serial killer. Okay. We'll say it was Jack the Ripper of medieval times. He's running through your woods. What are you gonna do? You have an opportunity to stop him, or you're gonna let that person go. If you let him go, you don't know who they're gonna kill next, and it might be your family in the middle of the night. You're gonna stop that person. What do we do now?
What did you do to stop them? What did you do after you?
I call the police. I don't know what you guys do. Jeez. You guys worry me a little bit with that kind of stuff. My wife used to do that when we lived in some rough areas. It's like, I don't want to do that. Those people are dangerous. You're still gonna go there and I'm gonna have to follow it. Yeah. Fun times. It really was. Definitely got some stories from that. But yeah. So you have that where now you have this element of responsibility. We also have this element of loss of freedom. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there, because at least I guess we were involved. As society shifted, this kind of area got shifted off onto the public domain, public officers, that kind of thing. You call it the police. And as we start dealing with community crime prevention stuff, This thing right here is what they start dealing with. Rather than having this be a public domain as in government, no, keep it here. Let's have the people deal with this. Let's see, where does this talk about? Medieval times, watches, hue and cry, whatever. It was worth remembering the medieval system progressively broke down as the rich employed individuals to perform this duty for them, reinforced their informal patrols with physical measures similar to gated communities, while the poor were left with little effective crime prevention provisions. Actually, if you think about medieval ages, after most people were poor, if they had property at all, they were rich, and those who weren't serfs bound to the land as slaves, most of them died. And bad ways, not good ways. Let's see. Broad changes in urban conditions, late modern societies recognize limitation of formal social control and concerns that police organizations have become removed from the communities that they have served. Okay, there's a few different things. Government. We have them do this. There's an element to that that's kind of dangerous. That would be asking, like, why is it we do not have a centralized police system within the United States? Because we're decentralized, we're a republic, and that representation is key to our survival. You get rid of that, you remove that representation out, that involvement of people, guess what? No longer a republic, this is a kingdom. So start trying to work on that. Excuse me. Gives you a few different models for crime prevention, say community organizing, tenant involvement, resource mobilization, community defense, preserving order, protecting the vulnerable. All different ways that people call attention to the same domain, the same type of stuff. Today, what is the role of the public in crime prevention? Information, largely information gathering. I mean, there'll also be your offenders, your assistants, your information, right? Largely is the role that they serve now. Start moving in crime prevention, this moves their role back over here, and it moves it in a number of different ways, whether it's through community programs, individual levels involved, individuals involvement in their communities, that kind of thing can drive, you have significant effects for just a few people. You have made some small changes, or you can do something like this book spends a significant amount of time talking about the role of things like neighborhood watches, right? The watchful eye is one that people don't like. People don't like being watched like that, so I like putting it that way. Because like a lot watching things. What do I want to tell you? There's a few things. So, cultural, qualitative aspects of this. Watches. If you have a neighborhood watch, if you have those types of things going on. What's another name for the people who are involved in neighborhood watches? We'll focus on what I said a minute ago. If they're providing this, what are they? Information. They're providing information that makes them an
Informant?
Yep, there you go, right? That's what you start getting into, right? Are you an informant? Are you an unofficial arm of that system? Right? This book doesn't, that does start to address it a little bit, but it doesn't hit it nearly as hard as I'd like. I have not had the pleasure of going to Europe as of yet, but I do know many people have. One of the starkest differences that I get related to me is in certain areas, the level of watchful eye, listening ears, and open communication, or I should say hidden communication with governmental authorities is extremely high. Does that sound like a place you want to live? If I said secret police, do I get that point across? Right? That's the danger you start dealing with when you start moving in these areas to if it extrapolates that bad. Usually it doesn't. Most of the time we end up with is like minor nuances, dealing with the real local stuff. Think about it this way. Right? Some people want on this, just like police officers. They'll want to be involved because they want to help, or they'll want to be involved with the advantage they can take. That kind of thing. Be like saying HOAs, their rules, and everything you've ever heard about people who've lived in an area where there's an HOA. It's like, I hate them. Why? People love to regulate others. So you run a very, very real risk of causing the entire neighborhood to shift into a very dissatisfied area. Satisfaction is one of those things that, guess what? That will affect this whole realm too. Like that's it gets complex. Here, what they say here, qualitative absence. While it's no doubt the dominant model, it's worth mentioning the early stage that neither principles on which community prevention are based, nor its associated practices are straightforward ones. Many commentators have noted that its theoretical foundations are shaky, and a great deal of empirical work has revealed the implementation of community crime prevention policies, which requires commitment from both police and from the citizens, can be problematic. All right, and it goes into greater detail as it goes. What do I want to tell you about that before I let you go? Because I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know you guys want to get on the papers. Okay. Okay. So you have the dangers associated with whenever you get it going. You have all the difficulties of getting it going. Focuses in on mobilization. Mobilization of people is a very, very difficult thing. Yeah, because as you're doing this, as you're trying to get people to take action towards the things that involve them, if you send them the wrong signal, send them that signal, you're shifting that responsibility. What's going to happen? It's going to take off. Direct effects. Will these things have direct effects on crime? Maybe, maybe not. Look, I'll actually give you some good, a good argument for. May not work. Why patrol doesn't always work. That kind of stuff. I'm sure you've already had conversations about the role of like, okay, what does patrol have on, what effect does patrol have on crime? Like, none. Crime just exists. They just find it. You'll see the patrol will affect the numbers. It doesn't have an effect on crime necessarily. Here what they do is they start to identify. We start looking at these numbers. We start looking at, okay, here's how many officers there are. Here's their patrol patterns. Here's where the crimes are. Here's how many take place that we know of. They did the math on it. It's like, okay, that means as these are distributed, think of these areas because England's much more thorough, smaller area. That means you could, on average, you're walking what this is, like 100 feet from a crime in progress and would be unable to notice this going on just because there's that much stuff going on. There's that many people. There's that many crimes, and all that's going on at once. Response times. Do those things have an effect on crime rate? Maybe yes, maybe no, not really clear. It'll influence crime. Does it really have an effect though? I don't know. I think not really. But the big part is that social control, that social contract aspect of it, the responsibility and its shift, because that means that this thing, they're renegotiating. That's what that is. We have certain services, we give up certain things for the public goods that are created because of it. That's part of that contract. This is an active renegotiation of those things. Okay. Community crime prevention can be seen as extension rather than withdrawal of state control. That's where they start getting into, hey, are we talking individuals? So when we start talking informants, we're talking agents of the government. That's a huge change. Then starts talking about risk management, those types of things. Okay, as it goes through the different facets of crime prevention, community crime prevention for this, policing and their overlaps. There are a few things I want to ask about because I don't know if I need to lecture. But I said police legitimacy. You guys ever heard that term before? Okay.
No.
So anytime you see that term, it's going to refer to an abstract concept. Basically, what you start talking about is when you say police legitimacy, for the most part, what people are referring to is, I mean, to give it a straightforward say, do people view the police as legitimate, like a legitimate force? Better way to identify it is what type of attitude do I have towards policing? And a more functional one would be if an officer's vehicle comes behind me as I'm driving down the road and its lights come on, do I pull over or do I step on the gas? Right? Legitimacy. Do you view them as a little legitimate force? How does that affect you? How does that affect people? And what kinds of things does it affect? It's like that's just one area that these things touch into. From there, start talking about stuff we talked about. I already talked about theories because that's where it starts talking about social disorganization and the basically the spectrum associated with that and social control. Yeah, that basically does it. So the two big ways that they talk about it in terms of community crime prevention. This social control side and opportunity reduction. You go on the informal side, you increase things like watches, marker, watches, that kind of stuff. More people, more of the community involvement, where the community is the one regulating it. Ideally, so that way your public resources are freed up, and you don't necessarily have that major qualitative change in the neighborhood kind of thing. We're not going to go to a police state, that kind of thing. But then it goes into more specific things about things that they're doing, like CCTVs, different types of neighborhood watches, community policing. Each of those are different topics to focus in on if you want to. But the only other one I would have you think about, mobilizing citizens and communities. That section is probably one. We talk about community policing, we talk about mobilizing the police. If you talk about community policing, community-oriented policing, that's a heavy topic you probably had in some of your policing courses before. If not, community-oriented policing is something that picked up in the 1970s, really, 80s. That again has to do with taking the police officer out of the car, putting him in the neighborhood. That's gonna be a whole range of things. Most people think foot patrols, that kind of stuff. But it's something that will affect every level of policing if they do it right, from the foot patrol all the way to the chief's perspective on what they see when they look at numbers, kind of thing. That kind of identifies how difficult it is to move an organization, all of its members. When you're dealing with the public, it's a bit more difficult because they're not going to be, they won't have a structure like that. It does bring into concepts like things you'll find in some of the theories that you may have encountered, things like collective efficacy, those types of stuff. As you're dealing with communities, as you're dealing with people, the concepts you see in those theories come back up. Collective efficacy would be collective efficacy and another one I can't remember. Social cohesion. There you go. how well a community fits together. That's their, factor is gonna deal with this one quite directly, collective ethics. Can not only they come together, can they get stuff done? They get stuff done. That means you try to implement something like this here. Very easy. But with that, I may stop there and let you guys get to work on the papers and such. Well, your outlines, and then start on the papers and such. If you have any questions, you need anything, oh, let me know. So what we'll probably do from here on out in this semester is we'll probably spend about half class time on paper, half class time on book, as you guys need it, right? And as we develop the papers in the coming weeks, we can shift that time as much as you guys need. If you find that we want to sit down and just deal with papers, we can do that. And we can sit down and like bring your computer and we can go line by line if we want. Or I can start showing you, like, okay, well, now that you've got the paper squared away, or you're playing with the data because you just had some extra time, yeah, let me show you some stuff. Cool. I would have had, so, oh, I'm not gonna write it. SPSS is the staff program I told you about before. Whenever I access the remote desktop, if I access it here, it's not popping up. If I access it on my computer, it does. If I access it here versus at home, I'm getting different things in different places. So I need to, IT, I'll probably do that next week or so. I did look into something called PSPP. They just switched the acronyms around. Same thing, but it's free. It is no longer as user friendly as it used to be. It used to be something I could go in there and download it and open it up and it run. Now you have to go and figure out, you have to get a tool to download it. You have to figure out the right iteration. They recompile it daily. So avoid, ignore that. Don't touch that. Yeah, because that one's gonna be a nightmare because you got a whole group of people. There's like 3 or 4 I could kind of figure out what they were trying to do. But they got a whole community doing that stuff now. That's changed in the last 10 years. Pretty cool. Also, a little harder to track if you're not good at Linux. I haven't done Linux in a long time. And that was good. Yeah, so one of those things to play with. But take the next, what is it, hour and a half? Spend that on identifying sources. Stick with YLSI. Immigration, go with that. Julia, you're in progress. Tristan, I didn't hear from you earlier. Shalise, remember I was looking at some of your stuff. Send me an email. And Tristan, if you can hear this and you can't talk, send me an email the same way. Send me an email and list out the topic and the theory, or 2 or 3 topics, or 2 theories, 3 theories that interest you. And what I'll do is I'll take that, I'll look at it and go, okay, here are, the 3 options I see that are really easy. And I'll be like, okay, yes, yes, no. These 2. Which one of these is easier? Or which one seems more interesting? That'll be your call, kind of thing, right? And if it ends up being, no, okay, then let's focus on one of these, that kind of thing. That'll be just negotiation from there. Cool?
And that comes from that.
Cool.
But for them, you're working on an outline. I want you to focus on YLSI because that's one I can show you very, very quickly. And as you're working on your capstone and all that stuff,
Does that work with the capstone too?
we can, yeah. You'll be getting feedback on that probably about this weekend. We gotta do feedback on capstone and theory. Yeah, those are the big ones I need to spend some time on grading this weekend. Didn't get it last weekend. No. But we'll get that squared away. I was reading, you're already kind of lining up in that area. I think that'd be a real easy way to start tying in both of those things together. Other than that, so if you kind of got an idea of what you're working on, great. If you don't, email me. Try to do that within the next 2 days, so that way you don't lose time. That'll be the big thing. With that, let's get rolling. Cool?
Yeah.
Cool. The gift of time. Don't expect this much to be given again. What we'll do is we'll work in class some, and as we get the sources outlined, you'll be surprised how quickly it comes together. It's one of those things that initial pull, if you get it done well, it flows. I mean, it will flow fast. But yeah, have fun. That's the big one. Make sure you're having fun. Well, I will see you all next time. Have fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll catch you all next week.
Or email.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you later.